Dreamflighters, are you ready? Are you ready for the first star points? Well, I am, and I like to tell you, we have the piles with the even and the odd ones, and we start with A1, number 1. We have the fabrics. Remember, we already pre-cut the fabrics. Fabric 8, fabric 3, fabric 1, and fabric 16. 8, 3, 1, 16. The first thing what we do, you place the fabrics on top of each other, exactly on top of each other. And when you do that, always remember, right side facing up, wrong side facing up. You take your template and you place your template a 1/4 inch away from the edge. This is the one. Place your needle in the corner, do a little back stitch, follow the arrows, and you end up here at the end and you do your tiny back stitch. Okay, I'll try to show it to you through the light of our sewing machine. Maybe you can see it. Maybe you can see the light shining behind it. It gives you a good idea of the position. Okay, my machine is ready. 1.5 white threads, a microtex needle, a full bobbin, and my piece. I put my needle in the corner, I do my back stitch, I try to stay exactly on the line, all the way into the seam allowance, and I do my back stitch. This is my first step. I finger press. I do a lot of finger pressing. And as you can see, I spread the fabric with my 2 fingers and I use my thumbnail and then I cut her. You can use an add a quarter. I love to use my big scissor and I give her a little bit of extra. You can see there's a little bit of extra fabric on the outside, and that is okay with me. Now I go to foundation point 3 and I need fabric 1. So what I do, I will fold her on the next line that I'm going to stitch. And again, if you want to, please use your add a quarter ruler. I like to cut her. I need fabric 1. You can see there's much more movement here than here, so that is a very nice spot to use. And again, stay away about a 1/4 inch from the edge. Fold the paper away. Start with your back stitch all the way down to the end. And as you can see, you stop before you go into the seam allowance, because for fabric 16 we have to do this. And when you close the seam, you have to tear her. That makes it a little bit harder. And again, your tiny back stitch, stay exactly on the line. When you work as precise as you can, the final result will be so much better. In fact, you will be rewarded with the beautiful points. And again, lower down your speed and you do your back stitch. Check your seam. It's a little bit big. And finger press. Spread the fabrics between your 2 fingers. And now we prepare foundation point 4. You fold her. You trim her. Take your little piece. Again, place her. Leave the point the way she is, because now you can see that under the light fabric number 1, you will see the green fabric number 16. And you also can see that your point will be covered in that green fabric. Okay, fold her away. Start with your tiny back stitch. Try to stay on top of your line all the way down into your seam allowance, and you do your back stitch. Use your @1/4 if you want to, or your nice sharp scissor to make a beautiful cut. And again, finger press the best you can. This is the point A1, number 1. And as you can see, we do have fabric all around it. Shall we make another one? I do have an even point 2. And in fact, this one will be the same, only the fabrics for foundation point 3 and foundation point 4 will be different. You place them exactly on top of each other, right side facing up, wrong side facing up. Place the point 1/4 inch away from the edge. You can feel it. Start with your tiny back stitch all the way down to the end. You can see the little arrows. They will guide you in the right direction. And again, finger press as best as you can. Give her that little bit of extra fabric on the outside. Take your fabric 6, and again, even they call it a solid batik. You can see how much movement there is, and I love to see what is going on here. So what we do now, we cut off the extra fabric. There's my folds. I hold her in place. I eyeball my 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I place her again on the right side of the piece. And you also can see that the pieces, although they are nice and generous, they are not incredibly big, but they are nice to work with. Try to stay exactly on the lines. You go all the way till the next line for foundation point 4. Bring down the speed of your machine and you do your back stitch. Check her. She is nice. Finger press. Give her that little bit of extra that we need. Okay. Fold foundation point 4. Give her an eyeball, 1/4 inch seam allowance. There is the little piece that we need, and we place her on the right side of the piece. Leave the way she is, because now you can see where the point is going. And when you do it this way, you can see that she will be covered in that pale light blue fabric. Okay, start with your tiny back stitch. And again, all the way to the end. And you do your back stitch. This is how we make the points. Our next step, we will press them and we will mark them, and we start with the second seam allowance, and we start assembling the pieces together to make the first beautiful star. This is the way we make all the stars. The fabrics are different, sometimes the stitching order is different, but it really is the same method, and it doesn't matter how complicated the star will be, the method is always the same. So our next step, we have to press or iron the star point. So what I do, I always press or iron on the fabric side, never on the side where my template paper is. And the reason is the iron is hot and the ink would melt on my iron. And because we use light fabrics as well, including the white background, you don't want the ink on your iron. So our next step, we have a beautiful point, and as you can see, we do have a smidge here on the outside. And there's another reason. It's not only that when you cut your papers a smidge from the outside, that it's easier to work, but it's also easier to position your ruler on top of the piece. So what we do, I focus on my dotted line, on my dash line here, and I place the dash line exactly on top of my star points. So if I do that, I put my hand on top of it. There's my rotary cutter, and I cut her exactly on the outside. I do the same here, my dash line. Press my fingers firmly onto the ruler. I cut the bottom and I guide with my fingers the curve. So, my next step, I cut off that second seam allowance, and you can see she's still here, but not here, so you can see the fabric. This is the little wiggle room that I want, because sometimes when you start assembling your star points together, the seams on the outside of your circle can become uneven. And when you have that little bit of wiggle room, sometimes it is just a smidge that you need. It really makes a difference. So what I do, I have my white marker. If you have a light fabric, I always use a regular pen. I do a dash line. For me, that makes it really easier to do. This is number 1. That's my 1. If I do this one, what I do to cut off my second seam allowance, I'm not cutting in the fabric. I only cut the second seam allowance from my templates. I try to stay exactly on the line. And again. There's my dash line. This is my star point number 8. And there's my number 8. Okay, and now I can take the papers off. And because our stitch length was 1.5, it is so much easier to take the papers from the piece. I throw all the papers away except for the larger pieces. There's a reason for, because when we start assembling the star points together, we will start in the bias of the point, and that is a fragile point. And if we stabilize her with a little piece of your throwaway paper, it really makes a difference, because we all be aware that sometimes the needle will push the fabric into the bobbin hole, and if you use your leftover pieces, they are nice and thin and you would avoid it. So let's go to the next step. I take some papers and then we place them in the right order and we can start assembling. Shall we go on? Okay, let's go.